Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host KHALID. But today is Friday the 13th of December 2024. These are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin with the Middle East situation, which more or less is becoming an enigma or a dilemma with the way things are moving forward in Syria, in Gaza, and of course what we've seen in Lebanon, what we've seen in other parts of the Middle East as well. A lot of brutality, a lot of aggression, a lot of deaths, a lot of hunger, a lot of dilemmas for the people of the lands that we have just spoken about, and a lot of pressure on the international organizations to do the needful. But are they able to do that despite the fact that there is a certain veto power available? Will the powers that be move forward as they have been claiming for a ceasefire, for an end to this war in Gaza and in Syria before it's way too late for the people of this region? This and more will be discussed in our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the China-U.S. relations. Now, there seems to be some kind of positivity emanating lately as far as this tangent is concerned as well, but we'll really get to know what the U.S. wants as far as its future with the China is concerned after the 20th of January next year. Nevertheless, some positive sentiments emanate, and we've also seen in the Biden administration how there was a recent visit and how there was a positivity that emanated from both the sides. Will both the countries be able to move up, forward together in an era where it's more important that such powers work together or collaborate despite their differences, whatever they might be? This is going to be our second segment. Then we are going to talk about Time magazine that has named Donald Trump as the person of the year for a second time. He previously won the honor after winning the presidential election in 2016. So another honor that goes in Donald Trump's kitty. Finally, Meta is releasing an artificial intelligence model which is called Meta Motivo. Now, this could control the movements of a human-like digital agent with the potential to enhance the whole metaverse experience. This is what a lot of them are trying to do. Meta as well, we're starting with the goggles and now with this. Artificial intelligence is more or less becoming a reality, with Apple also moving forward in that direction and other companies as well. This is going to be the lineup for today. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the Middle East. A dilemma, an enigma, or much more, or a more complex situation in the region. We've been joined by JAUHAR SALEEM Saab. He's a former Foreign Secretary and President of the IRS. Thank you very much, JAUHAR SALEEM Saab, to have joined us, to have given us your time. And of course, we know that you've got lots of responsibilities on your belt, and anyways, Palestinian authorities, JAUHAR Saab, say at least 33 people have been killed and in an Israeli strike of the Nuseirat refugee camp. This is not the only refugee camp where the brutalities continue to occur. Jabalia is another refugee camp where this is happening. Displacement orders have also been given in Gaza, in several areas in Gaza, by the Israelis for the Palestinians. The Palestinians already have nowhere to go. They are told to displace themselves from one place to the other and from the other to the first place as well. 44,800 plus people who have been killed, and 110,000 more or less who've been injured. This is just the unofficial figure. Is this going to continue further in your point of view? To which extent, now that we are hearing some kind of rumors about some peace deal that might eventually take place?
Well, this is a very unfortunate situation that we see unfolding, and it continues to unfold. This reign of terror unleashed by Israel in Gaza, which has resulted in about 50,000 deaths so far, and untold suffering in terms of the conditions there. 70% of the buildings have been destroyed.
Yes.
Basic amenities of life are non-existent. There's no health care to speak of available to the people there. And then there's this threat of starvation. Hunger is already there. And a winter is looming large for the people there, because they have no heating, no basic amenities to protect them from the vagaries of the weather. Now that is in my view, there were many instances where a ceasefire could have been effective.
The three-phase ceasefire, for example, that had been proposed by Joe Biden.
I think Biden I personally feel that Biden administration tried really hard for a ceasefire because of 2 or 3 reasons. One was the international pressure, because the whole world literally was on one side and Israel was on the other with the U.S. And that was devastating for the U.S. soft power in the world. The second reason was domestic, because an election was taking place in the U.S. And for Democrats, their core constituencies, some of the core constituencies, for instance, the Arab Americans, the Muslim Americans, the young and the women, particularly the college-educated young and women, they were calling and demonstrating for an end to this brutality. And in fact, there's this one theory which is very interesting, that Netanyahu had some sort of an understanding with Trump, because they're very close in terms of having a personal rapport, while Biden did not really enjoy very good relations with Netanyahu. So the understanding, as per this theory, was that no ceasefire would take place until the elections. Because you see in the 3 blue wall states, the so-called blue wall states, that is Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and these are the states where there was a significant Arab American vote, particularly in Michigan, over 100,000, and in the other 2 states as well. And there, some of that vote either voted for Trump then, because they were really disappointed by Biden's inability to effect a ceasefire to stop this brutality. And at the end of the day, the election was decided, okay, there's a difference of 2.5 million between the 2 sides this time. Trump won the popular vote as well. But very interestingly, it has been calculated that only 115,000 votes in these 3 states basically decided the election. Why? Because if that 115,000 votes would have switched, then Kamala would have won these 3 states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And winning these 3 states would have meant that she would have won the election instead of Trump. So the point is, this vote became so important. And if we go by that, and in fact, this was my hunch as well, that it's possible that something like that, whether it was planned or not, but it did happen in the election. This election was very close. Eventually, it led to.
So what you mean to say is that the Middle East has played a very important role as far as the outcome of the election is concerned.
Oh, definitely critical role in this election, because see, some other numbers, for instance. Biden got 81 million votes in the 2020 elections. This time, and that was the Democrat vote, not personal to Biden as such. In this election, Kamala Harris got about 75 million votes roughly. So about 6 million votes less. And that vote, why did she get the 6 million votes less? Because a lot of voters stayed away. They were not happy.
With the current situation, I think Jauhar Sahab, I understand where you're going to, and this is the mistrust that the people had in the Democrats, because they could not handle the Middle East situation. But the Middle East situation is still boiling. It is still reeling from the same undercurrents that we saw a couple of months back. U.S. National Security Advisor Jauhar Sahab, Jake Sullivan, says a ceasefire and captives deal to end the war in Gaza is close. He says it's time to finish the job. Trump has also promised to solve the Middle East issue, saying Netanyahu knows that the incoming U.S. administration wants the Gaza war to end. You alluded to some kind of collusion between Netanyahu and Trump. Do you feel that this is going to be an ace that Trump is going to put once he comes into power, the end to the Israel-Palestine war? What's your comment on that?
Like I said, that was a theory, and if one goes by that, at any rate, whether that theory is true or not, the fact is that it would suit Trump that this ceasefire takes place when he assumes power, which is January 20th. And so that is very likely now, I think, that a ceasefire, some sort of a ceasefire, would happen once Trump assumes the presidency. And that will happen, in my view, after the January 20th,
All
not
right.
before
So
that.
we have to wait a bit more before a ceasefire of any kind happens, whether it be Gaza. But we're talking about Gaza right now. A report by watchdog group Air Wars, which assesses civilian harm from airstrikes, releases a report that says that the Israeli campaign in Gaza was by far the most intense, the most destructive and fatal conflict for civilians that it had ever recorded. Is this going to set a precedent? What happened in Gaza? Is this going to set a precedent when it comes to genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity?
Unfortunately, there have been instances in Africa where,
Rwanda,
for instance, Congo, where many more lives were lost in similar crises. But then the difference was that those were more like civil wars and sort of, between two groups or amongst more than two groups. Here the situation was very different. This is an asymmetrical warfare, if you can call it a warfare, because it's literally, on the one side there's a very, very powerful, one of the most powerful armies of the world against mostly a civilian population. So it's a very, in terms of the, like what has happened, yes, it is a precedent now, a new precedent, in terms of 21st century, where in the heart of Middle East, such brutalities have taken place for such a long time, over a year now. It was 7th October when it started, and now we are in December the following year. And what we saw in this particular crisis, that the United Nations spoke, that there were resolutions in the United Nations Security Council, not just in the United Nations General Assembly. But despite that, and then of course there was a ruling in ICJ, a very clear ruling, and then the charges in ICC. But despite all that, Israel has continued relentlessly with its military operation there, and not just continued with that, but actually expanded that operation to include Lebanon as well, as we saw. Now what has helped them has been the fact that they were able to eliminate the first-tier leadership, Ismail Hania, Mohammed Daif then, after that Yahya Sinwar, and on the Hezbollah side, of course, Hassan Nasrallah, and the second tier there as well. And in fact, hundreds of their middle or tier leaders as well. So that enabled Israel to somehow suppress the dissenting voices at home, because there were a lot of demonstrations, as we know, within Israel as well, calling for stopping this conflict and calling for a ceasefire agreement which would bring the hostages home. But because of these so-called trophies that Netanyahu was able to claim, that look, I've destroyed this, not only Hamas but also Hezbollah, I've taken out the top leadership, the middle tier leadership and all. So that has enabled him to continue with that. And yes, unfortunately, it is a new precedent in that way.
All right. It's also a precedent when it comes to the humanitarian loss, the loss of journalists as well. More than 100 journalists have been slain since this began on the 7th, and also on the humanitarian side, also the number of casualties is immense. And the health crisis that we've talked about as well. Chinese Foreign Minister JAUHAR Wang Yi says Beijing has agreed with Egypt that both nations should promote peace and negotiations to achieve stability in the Middle East. Wang Yi apparently, as per reports, made these remarks during a meeting with the Egyptian counterpart, Mr. Abdelati, in Beijing on Friday. He also said Beijing and Cairo are deeply concerned about the current situation in Syria and called for respect for Syrian sovereignty. He said that we have agreed that we should promote peace and negotiations in order to achieve peace and stability in the Middle East, which includes, of course, Palestine and Syria. How important are statements such as these in the current scenario?
Well, the Chinese were actually, they were the first, after the military action was instituted by the Israelis, in terms of coming up with a statement which even in those days called for two-state solution. And then after that we heard many more voices, including a plan by President Biden as well, what he called the Grand Reconciliation, whereby there was going to be a reconciliation between the Arab countries and Israel, the remaining Arab countries, because some have already reconciled. But there was also going to be a pathway to the statehood for the Palestinians. That did not materialize. But the Chinese have consistently been supporting the voices calling for an end to this conflict, an end to this brutality. I was myself in China, in fact I just got back 2 days ago at the head of a academia, media and think tanks delegation. And we had meetings with many think tanks there, some of the leading think tanks. And yes, there's a great deal of concern in China about the situation in the Middle East. And they want to see that because they believe that Middle East in some way is a key to world peace and stability. And if there's no peace and stability in the Middle East, it affects the whole world, not just in political terms, but also in economic terms.
True.
But having stated that, I think these statements are useful, of course, but China has no real influence there, to affect some real change in that way. Although we have to remember that China was able to mediate a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi,
which was huge,
which was a major step and forward for the two countries, and which surprised everybody. But then the two countries were interested in that, and China was able to bring them on board. Here the situation is that all the peace efforts so far that we have seen in terms of having a ceasefire agreement at least, those were led by the US, and the countries involved were like Egypt, Qatar, Jordan, and of course Israel itself, and the Palestinian leadership. So we didn't really see China actively involved in the diplomacy there.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Syria. There are many developments happening on the diplomatic front. Firstly, the leaders of the Group of 7 democratic powers are meeting as we speak. They are having a meeting that started at 1430 GMT, which is more or less the time that we are discussing this thing right now. And this is a virtual meeting that is happening. They are going to talk about the peaceful transition to an inclusive and non-sectarian government in Syria. Then there is also the meeting between Turkey and Moscow that has happened very recently, where they apparently both are trying for a push for a smooth political transition and regional stability, as well as far as Syria is, Without moving into the US domain, I would like to understand what the importance of the G7 as well as Turkey and Moscow. Turkey and Moscow are both, of course, as far as Syria is concerned, have been leading players in that situation. But what do you foresee as far as Syria is concerned? Will the G7, will Turkey, will Moscow, or will the US manage to bring some kind of peaceful transition in Syria?
Well, Turkey is directly involved because they are supporting SNA there, one of the groups, although they're having problem with another group which is being supported by the US there, but we could talk about it perhaps a little later. G7 countries, okay, initially everybody had welcomed it, and countries are still welcoming what has happened there. That is the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. Now, the last time during the Arab Spring days, when there was an attempt to do so, and there was a group of disparate factions or disparate militias or resistance groups who tried to oust Bashar, that attempt failed primarily because of Russian involvement, because Russia is very staunch and strong support to Bashar al-Assad. Also, Iran was providing support to Bashar al-Assad's regime then, probably subsequently as well. This time it has all happened so swiftly that neither Iran has been already weakened because of the fact that it's what the analysts call its proxies there, like Hezbollah, or it's more supported Hamas as well, and the Houthis. They have been all weakened. At least two of them have been literally decimated, Hamas and Hezbollah, in many ways, or majorly dented. So Iran was in no position to really bolster Assad at this point. For Russia, it was, again, Russia is embroiled in a conflict in Ukraine, where it's literally, putting all its resources. Again, Russia, this happened so swiftly that Russia even did not really get the reaction time to get involved. So I think both Russia and Iran so far are the kind of losers in terms of having lost some influence, or having lost a government.
What about the U.S.? Anthony Blinken says that the transition in Syria after the departure of al-Assad should be inclusive, non-sectarian. It's got to uphold and protect the rights of all Syrians, including minorities, including women. And he has also met with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He has met with Jordan's King Abdullah. Will this maneuvering yield some kind of positive results?
No, it's a very curious situation for the Western countries there, because on the one hand, the groups like HTS, which has spearheaded the ouster of Assad. Now it's basically previously the leadership and the cadres had owed allegiance to Al-Qaeda, although they subsequently disavowed that allegiance, but still that history is there. Now the other groups involved, there are groups which are basically Kurdish in sort of, like in substance, and they are opposed by Turkey, and then there are groups that Turkey is supporting, which are non-Kurdish. So it's quite a hodgepodge there, and of course there are other groups as well. Now, what they want to see is, because the biggest threat to this, this situation right now, Assad's ouster has been affected, but the biggest threat to the regime, which is now taking power there, is its own constituents. What if they start fighting amongst themselves? And it has happened in many places before. In fact, some analysts are saying that this could be a repeat of what happened in Afghanistan in the 90s. There could be a civil war and all these groups could start fighting. And I think this is what the West wants to preclude, and the G7 wants to prevent as well. And that is why they're calling for an inclusive government of all these groups, and a government which also has some sort of a legitimacy eventually by having some sort of a mandate, whether by having elections, or at least because of the inclusivity itself, representing all the, like they said, all the ethnicities and all the various sects. Because in this region, the Shia-Sunni conflict has been very intense over the years, in fact, over decades. And I think that is the biggest concern right now, to have a government which would be inclusive to the point, at least, where it is stable, number one, and number two, where the possibility of an infighting amongst these sort of, because these are loosely allied groups who don't really share the same values or ideals or political leanings. So they're really disparate in that way. And then the external actors, like I've mentioned, like Turkey, for instance, or the other actors. And it's very interesting, like the Israelis, they also have claimed that, that they were the enablers in some ways.
But you talk of, it's interesting, you talked about the Kurdish-led the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF. Now, Blinken says that this role of the SDF has been critical to prevent a resurgence of ISIS in Syria. So we see a clear backing of a certain group there. But on the other hand, we've got Turkey that does not like this group at all, because it is a Kurdish group, and Kurdish rebels have been, working against Turkish interests.
SDF is dominated by Kurdish elements, and some of them belong to what used to be PKK. Öcalan's that group, which the Turkish forces have been fighting for many years now, in fact decades, and which caused a lot of terrorism in Turkey. In fact, I used to be in Turkey from 1999 to 2002, and PKK was very active even in those days, and has been active ever since, in terms of, there have been sort of waves, sometimes it becomes more intense or less. On the other hand, Turkey, the SNA, the Syrian National Army, that is there to fight the Kurds or contain the Kurds. So it's a, like I said, it's a very curious situation, very volatile situation, I would say, and that is why I don't think it will be easy for
the inclusive government to happen anytime soon, or anytime, a smooth transition that is, as many of the West is talking about, that might not be as smooth as we think or they think it might be. But it, as you said, it looks like a hodgepodge of things, and this added to the crisis in Palestine, which still hasn't ended, puts the Middle East into a situation of disarray and disillusionment and mayhem that we have rarely seen in the last century. So let's hope things somehow move or start moving in the right direction, and for that we'll need the West, the US and other important countries to really stay steadfast as far as finding a solution to these issues is concerned.
No, definitely, I think the steadfastness is there, the continued interest. In any case, you see the new regime, in order to have some possibility of success, they would need a lot of outside support in terms of humanitarian support,
I'm sure
in terms of economic support, and in terms of support of sort of technological or.
But for that, that is a long. But in the short term, I think we need to see a ceasefire happening, an end to this turmoil, to this war that is happening, whether it be in Palestine or in Syria. Thank you very much, JAUHAR SALEEM Saab, former Foreign Secretary, President IRS, to have joined us to talk about the situation as far as Middle East is concerned. And I mean, keeping our fingers crossed as to what happens in the next few days and how this pressure accumulates and works in the right direction. Thank you again, sir. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns China-U.S. relations under the Trump presidency. Trump is to take his oath on the 20th of January 2025, and before that also there have been some overtures that were made by the Biden government, but US States President-elect Donald Trump has invited his Chinese counterpart to attend his inauguration ceremony in January, despite his history with China as well. On Thursday, Trump's incoming press secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed reports of the invitation in an appearance on the conservative TV channel Fox News. She framed the invitation as an effort to strengthen ties between the two countries. There is a lot of symbolism behind this invitation, but there's a lot of positivity that has been emanating as far as the US-China relations are concerned, despite the skirmishes, despite the tensions on the trade front and others, and of course the different opinions that both the sides have of each other. Maybe there's a silver lining at the end of this tunnel. We've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. ZAMIR Ahmed AWAN Saab, foreign affairs expert, joins us in the studio. ZAMIR Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. And Dr. TALAT SHABBIR, who is the director China-Pak Study Center at the ISSI, joins us online. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us as well. We'll begin with you, ZAMIR Saab. US President-elect Donald Trump invites his Chinese counterpart to attend his inauguration ceremony. Whether that happens or not, but there is a gesture that has come from the US side. Do you feel that Donald Trump wants to create an open dialogue with countries such as China?
Trump is an unpredictable person. His personality is drastically changing. Furthermore, about his invitation, it is reported by Fox News.
Yes.
In diplomacy, there is a protocols, how they will invite him. There are certain procedures and there are certain ways and there are certain manners. Reported by a news agency, a TV channel, I think we should not take it very, very serious.
All right.
On the other hand, even though if President Trump has invited and there was official procedure how he has invited him on the paperwork or how it is between two foreign ministries, still China is a mature country. They will review this invitation. There is a consultation process inside the Chinese government, and once they will decide either the President Xi Jinping should attend it or not, they will make the decision.
All right.
Before that, giving any comment is too early. Even that you see the Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson, he said he has no information.
Of course. So, I mean that is logical, because everything, as you said, comes through official quarters. Dr. Talat, during Trump's first term between 2017 and 2021, he had initiated a trade war with China. Both countries had imposed tariffs on each other's imports. In 2019, the UN Trade and Development Organization had issued a report warning that this trade war was economically nurturing both countries. Experts have also warned that the cost of tariffs is often offset onto the consumers. Could things be different this time around, or are we going to see the same tariff wars happening once Trump comes into power?
Thank you, Umar, for having me on your show. First of all, I think ZAMIR Sahab has rightly described Mr. Trump's personality, and we can have many surprises to come in when he takes over as President of the United States of America. Now, the tariff war or trade war, which was primarily done through tariffs, by the American government, and it was reciprocated by Chinese equally, began in 2018. Now, that was the time when Trump thought, the advisors to Trump thought that since there's a lot of trade deficit with China, and the industries in the United States is being hurt by the Chinese products pouring in, flowing in America. So this there has to be a tariff, or there has to be some measures taken to stop this ingress of Chinese products, huge Chinese products in America, which is hurting, of course, traders and and businessmen in the U.S. Now, if we just go by a statement that Mr. Trump made after this BRICS summit, he said, if you try to create a rival currency in place of dollar, so you should expect 100% tariff on your products in America. So now that is a kind of threat that he has already given to the countries who are thinking of, maybe undermining Trump. So you can have, for example, and similarly, this invitation to Chinese president is another move. So, which confuses people. On one side, he's threatening them with tariffs, and on the other side, he's inviting the president of China to his oath-taking ceremony. So, I think when it comes, Trump would be different. In my sense is that he would be different from what he was in his last term. But since he's very aggressive, since he got the votes on this hyper-nationalism theme, since he is very protectionist, he's known as protectionist in his country. So there would be some steps that he would be taking under pressure from his peers and from the business community that has supported him during election campaign. So finger crossed, probably we can have more tariff games, more tariffs and counter tariffs by Chinese. And it's not only China, by the way. This tariff is also imposed on countries who are into importing drugs in the America, and Mexico is one country, Canada is another country, and many other countries also. But China is a major, effectee of this tariff business. So we can wait and see as to how things move. If you go by the news report about the invitation, it appears that the news was actually broken to the media by some official channels. So, but of course, as ZAMIR Sahab has said, that there is certain protocol that follows when you are invited to such a grand event. And like there's also precedence that there's no head of states have attended those. Normally those functions are attended by officials from various countries. So let's see what turns out to be in Washington.
On live with us, Dr. Saab. I'll come to you, ZAMIR Sahab. ZAMIR Sahab, there have been some measures that have been taken by this upcoming Trump administration. I'd like to highlight this. Trump has tapped hawkish former Senator David Perdue as the ambassador to China. Then the Secretary of State nominee, Marco Rubio, who has accused China of deploying theft and predatory tactics to strengthen its economy and has been sanctioned by China. Rubio has been sanctioned by China in 2020. Do you feel steps such as these will prove to be a bottleneck as far as improving relations with China?
I think there will be no option for America except improving relations with China. China is a growing economy and has a much influence globally. Having confrontation with China is no option for America.
All right.
Whatever Trump is saying or whatever statements are coming before he is taking oath as a president of America in 20th January, these are part of his political campaign during the election. He has promised with his nation and he has got the votes of the people based on certain assumptions or some certain promises. So he might have to keep his voters happy.
All right.
But practically, I believe after taking oath, he will be a changed person. He will be not as Donald Trump of the last tenure.
As Dr. Talat is also saying.
I fully endorse Dr. Talat's point of view.
Okay, so Dr. Talat, over to you, as Zamir Sahib has also endorsed your opinion. There is certain evidence recently that has surfaced that the US could seek to increase cooperation with China moving forward. Now, the Biden administration has announced a delegation of senior Treasury Department officials that are going to travel to Nanjing in China, while other officials are going to coordinate with their Chinese counterparts at a meeting for the group of 20, that G20 forum in South Africa. Trump as well, I mean, this is the Biden administration, of course. Now, the Trump administration, including Trump, has signaled a willingness to warm relations. He was speaking from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange on Thursday. He said that the incoming administration would engage in a lot of talks with China. I'll say what he said, quote unquote. He said, we have a good relationship with China. I have a surprising relationship. Now, when COVID came in, I sort of cut it off. This was a step too far, he said. We remember what happened during the COVID era, and now Trump admits that he made a step too far. Should we be hopeful that these global powers could move forward in the right direction as far as cooperating or collaborating in the Trump era is concerned?
Yeah, there's a mixed signal. There are certain steps that he is taking, even if he's not taken oath, that reflect that he is going to be very hardliner as he was before. But there are certain steps that he takes that give some indication that he may opt to collaborate and go into a collaboration with China, since China is a rich country, China is a great country. So I think there's a school of thought in the US also, which thinks that both countries can grow together, both countries can be rich together. So I think there's a school of thought also which says that confrontation with China may not pay back well to the United States. So they should find out certain ways and means whereby you can collaborate with China. But as I was mentioning, that when you are elected as president or you are elected politically elected to an office, you have certain baggage with you. Like many people who voted to Trump, they believed in America first. So there are certain policies that Trump is going to unfold when he takes over as president, should definitely align with what he said in the election campaign. That means America first.
Dr. Talat, as I was telling Zamir Saab, he has nominated Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State, and the same Marco Rubio has been sanctioned by China in the year 2020. Then the US ambassador to China that has been tapped by Donald Trump is also David Perdue, who's a very hawkish senator. Don't you feel these are the negative elements that could also not side too well with the Chinese side?
Yes, of course, definitely. A person who is not liked by China, you put him an ambassador there, you put him a special representative, or give him some assignment that he has to deal with your counterpart. So these are signals which are not very positive. But when we talk of overall policies of Donald Trump, I think since he's a person who is considered as, why should America go into wars, unnecessary wars, one? Why should America do which he is not supposed to be doing? Why should America do all this at the cost of people, at the cost of prosperity, at the cost of problems of people? So I think the focus of Trump administration would be definitely in world, and they will be looking to people's benefit, people's progress, and more issues, domestic issues will be the hallmark of his, I think, administration's going forward. But definitely, since America is a great country, America is a great economy. They have international obligation also, so they have to be in that competition for being superpower. So I think only after January 20, we will be able to know as to what exactly he wants this world, what role he has for the world now in this term. But I just, it's my sense that he would be quite different person from what he was before, and he would be definitely going into cooperate. He will have cooperative mode, but definitely not compromising at what he is used to promise with people in the election campaign. I think there's going to be some good, nice things he will do, and something that will annoy maybe some countries, but he will definitely do it to actually satisfy his constituency back at home. But I think Trump realizes that world has to move forward, and if you have to move forward, you have to create an environment of coexistence. You have to coexist with other countries, and China is a reality, and I think Americans have realized that China is a big reality, and they have to actually adjust to this reality. Otherwise, there's no way out. I was just mentioning in the day with a delegation, Chinese delegation, that look, there's a corporate China and there's a corporate America. So there's a lot of interdependence that has created this corporate world of both the countries. So when you do something, you will have to, when you do something aggressive, when you do something negative, annoying other country, you will have to keep in mind that there's a lot of companies, American companies working in Shanghai, and there's a lot of Chinese companies working in New York. So now there are corporate interests of both the countries. So it's not going to be very easy to decouple or keep conflict alive. Just go as you want to go, just bully around. I think definitely Trump administration will also take into account these factors, which affect definitely their country also. Now, this trade war is not something that harms China only. Trade war actually harms American people also, American consumers also, American markets also. So it's a crucial issue for both the countries. So I think there will be a lot of brainstorming going on in the America as to how to deal with this issue. Of course, they have to deal with this issue, but I have a point that definitely when you make big promises in election campaign, you have to do at least some of them. You have to fulfill some of them.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Talal Shabir, to have joined us all the way. That was Dr. Talal Shabir, Director, China Park Study Center, ISSI, joining us and talking to us about the future of the relations between the China and U.S. administrations and companies. And let's see how it moves. It could go either ways, but let's wish for a more balanced approach, a more pro-positive approach as far as that is concerned. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. Last question to you, Zamir Saab. Dr. Saab was alluding to a corporate China and to a corporate U.S. There was a recent U.S.-China Business Council gala that happened in Washington. It happened on Wednesday, in fact, just 2 days back, on which a letter written by Xi Jinping was read out aloud, in which he says one phrase, and I'd like to quote that. He says, "We should choose dialogue over confrontation and win-win cooperation over zero-sum games." I feel this is a very important message, and at the right time when Trump is about to take his oath in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, the message has, I'm sure, gotten across. But will the U.S. reciprocate?
If you see the Chinese policy for the last few decades, they are always engaging the people through dialogue. They have a confrontation with many other countries also. And they have put aside all the differences, and through dialogue, they are making progress toward the friendship and trade and economy. This is the Chinese style. This is the Chinese approach. So they have expressed their willingness to keep America with through dialogue and cooperation. American approach, you know, America is a country which has a long history and the global leader for at least several decades. It's not run by only one president only. There are think tanks, there are policymakers, there are advices from the different segments of the society. I believe there are people in America, they understand China and they understand the Chinese perspective too. And they also know what will be the impact of the confrontation with China. So I think that whatever Donald Trump says nowadays, these are just for the public consumption, for the voters' consumption. He have to keep his voters satisfied. But when he will really take oath and come into the power after the 20th January, he will take a much mature approach and will improve the relation with China. Maybe not ideal, maybe there will be some differences.
Okay, we can only wait and see, Zamir Sahab, that is all we can do. But nevertheless, some of the developments are quite positive from both the fronts, and that is what we should take home, the message that we should take home or take across. Thank you very much, Zamir Sahab, to have joined us. Zamir Ahmad AWAN, Foreign Affairs expert, joining us in the studios to discuss the future of Pakistan, not Pakistan, rather China-U.S. relations that will unfold once Donald Trump takes oath as the President of the United States of America on the 20th of January 2025. Very quickly, last two stories. The first concerns Donald Trump himself, who has been named Man of the Year or Person of the Year for a second time. The first time that he was named Person of the Year was in 2016, and now again he has been made a Person of the Year. Time magazine says in its description on the short list that he won the 2024 election in a stunning political comeback. Time magazine says, and I quote, he has reshaped the American electorate, activating young male voters who propelled him to a decisive victory that saw him win the popular vote for the first time and turn every swing state red. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, Meta is releasing an artificial intelligence model called a Meta Motivo, which could control the movements of a human-like digital agent with the potential to enhance the metaverse experience. Meta is flowing in the money, the billions of dollars into investments as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. You can see the images that are unfolding on the parallel window as well. AI is the future. This is what a lot of companies are saying, and everybody from Apple to Meta are putting their money in it. Will it prove to be as beneficial for all of them? That only time will tell. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to a conclusion of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with new story segments that pertain to us here in Pakistan. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Allah Hafiz.